Excellent. So yes, hi, I'm Wendy Palmer. I'm from Australia, if you haven't picked up the accent and the allusion to what side of the road do I drive on. And very, very lovely to be here on the first International Day of Recognition. And today I just wanted to share some ideas that I've been working on around visibility and trust around recognition. And given that we are telling stories, I just wanted to share one of my own stories, which was one of my very first jobs when I started work. I worked for a recruitment company, and my job was resume writer. And over 2 years, I probably interviewed close to 1,000 people. I spoke to them for 45 minutes, and then I wrote a resume for them. I've realized two things. One, that was my very first role in recognition. And two, I was a very early AI bot, because I think that's what we all use AI for now. But what I did realize at the time is that a lot of these people had very strong experience. They had qualifications, even if those qualifications weren't recognised here in Australia. They had lived experience. But when I was interviewing them and writing their resumes, many of them lacked the confidence, the insight into their own skills to be able to articulate it. And I've come back to this sort of many years after that job, realizing that even if we give people lots of credentials and we have this sort of amazing technology system, if people themselves don't understand what they're capable of doing, and if they can't articulate it themselves, it doesn't matter how many shiny badges we give them, they're still going to not be able to use the potential of that. And so what I wanted to talk about then is, when we talk about recognition, I love this phrase. I think when I first heard it, I thought it was very trite, but it's really started to resonate with me. This idea of I see you, because I think recognition starts at that point. It doesn't start when someone's completed something and we give them a credential. Recognition starts very much when a teacher sees potential, a manager recognises capability. It could be someone working in a volunteer capacity, and the coordinator there says, hey, look, I really like the way you organised the team, and, you stepped up and showed leadership. Or a community that values contribution, because the skills, the capability and the recognition arrive long before that visible signal. And I think it's really important to remember that. And one of the problems that we have is that despite all of the, all that we know about how capability develops and skills, we currently still stuck using proxies. So we use degrees or job titles, years of experience. We look at what company did you work for, what university did you study at, and they're what we use to try and understand capability. But what we really want to know is, what can this person actually do? What are they capable of? And even though degrees and job titles can tell us a certain amount, they don't actually get down to that individual level. I can think of numerous cases where people have similar job titles, but vastly different roles, vastly different skills and capabilities. You think of an office manager who might be managing a team of 20 people, completely different to an office manager who's managing a pool of providers and doing contracts and negotiations. They're different skill sets. So I think what we've got is this opportunity to say, with what we're doing around credentialing and what we're doing around that, the portable verifiable proof, we still need to think about, well, what does that actually mean to people? Because the promise is that it will be visible, portable, recognised, and that's a promise that, I've been hearing probably for about the last 5 years or 10 years. But the big problem that we have is they're not all equally useful, meaningful, or trusted. And when you look at just the sheer number of credentials that are out there and how they're sometimes used, I think we've got a really big problem, in the sense that we're developing a system, but we're not necessarily paying enough attention to what makes that system trusted. And it isn't the fact that one machine can talk to another. That's how the system runs. but it's how do we build the trust into them. I think many of you in the room here will know Noah from Boulder University, and he put this quote on LinkedIn last year, and I absolutely loved it, because it says if a student can't name the skill, if they can't explain what they did to earn it and articulate why it matters to an employer, it's actually us that have failed, the educators, not or the work that's failed the student, not the student themselves. And so it doesn't matter what badge we give to people if they don't know why they got it. And I've heard numerous cases where people have been awarded badges and they're like, well, I think I got it because I was studying and then these skills, but I'm not quite sure why. Even people who said, I got a badge and I didn't realize I was getting it. So we need to do better on that. And one of the concepts that I've been looking at and thinking about is in much the same way that when we entered into the digital world, we started talking about digital literacy. You know, can you use digital tools effectively? Can you participate confidently in the digital world? AI literacy is very much top of mind at the moment. Can you understand the opportunities, the risks, and the ethical use of AI? And again, can you participate confidently in an AI-enabled world? And then I think we need a layer around the work we do. We're moving into a skills-based economy, and I think we need skills literacy. And that is the ability to, you know, can we recognize, articulate evidence and translate skills? Do we understand capability? You know, I talk to a lot of people and, you know, we often say one of the hardest things to do is to write your own resume or to write your career profile on LinkedIn, because we work in sort of outputs and projects and things that we produced or did, but we don't often make explicit, well, how did we do it? What was the skill that I used to actually complete that? Or what capability did I build whilst I was doing that? And I think that's why we need to, alongside the technology, the systems, the processes, actually think a little bit more seriously about this idea of skills literacy and actually helping people to talk about it. So if you look at this framework, the very start of it is recognizing skills. You know, and I think back, I've been in the educational learning field for nearly 30 years, and one of the models we used to use a lot was that idea of, you know, unconscious incompetence through to conscious competence. And I think a lot of us in our work, we get to that unconscious competence level, we just do it. And the problem is we often skip the conscious competence, so we don't even recognize what skills we have. We don't know how to name them. And then if we don't recognize what they are, it's very difficult to articulate them, to describe them to other people. And then the next layer is to make them really credible. We want to put evidence behind them. Well, how do you know you can do that? You know, you say you're capable of this. What's the evidence? Oh, well, the evidence is that this is how I used it. These are the contexts. I worked on these projects, and this is what I did. And so being able to piece that together. And then what's really important, I think, in today's world, where, you know, we're all told that our jobs will disappear or change within the next 5 years, how do you apply that into new contexts? So instead of trying to future-proof ourselves by thinking of every possible skill we might need, it's around, oh, I did that here, and I can see how that same skill set would be applicable in this situation. And it's the same thing when our graduates move from work or from learning into work. They're often, you know, you don't have the employability skills, but often they've gained them through study, but it hasn't been made explicit. So they don't know how to connect the dots. They don't know how to use them. And it's important to all of the stakeholders within this. It's important to individuals, for confidence, visibility, as I said, mobility, for educators, because it's then thinking about how do we design to actually build that capability and make it explicit? How do we give students evidence? How do we better help them understand what they're developing and what they're doing, and then the pathways of where it can take them? And when we look at employers, how do we hire better? And if we understand what skills and capabilities are and what we're actually asking people to do, we're going to make better hiring decisions, better use of our talent, and better alignment. So I think when we're talking about badges or digital credentials, I often have conversations with people and they're like, well, I'm not sure if it's professional development or if it's a certification. So should I use a circle, a square, a shield, a diamond? Should I put colors inside it? And we have all those sorts of conversations. But I think what we should really be asking is, what claim are we making about this person or about ourselves? Because recognition can also be, I claim this, I recognize this is what I can do. And then what evidence makes that claim trustworthy? Because it really doesn't matter what the picture on the badge is. What it needs to be able to do underneath it is claim something about a person and then provide the evidence that makes that trusted. And I think this is so important because if we are going to move, or we are moving into a skills-based economy, and this idea of recognition and the recognition of all learning doesn't matter where it happens. And that's going to depend on whether or not we can make the claims visible, understandable, and trustworthy. I would love to see a future where every single person is able to say, I can explain what this claim says about me. And everybody who hears that claim can say, I can trust what this claim says. Thank you.
Hi there. Sorry, just replying to somebody who's asking a question. Thank you very much, Wendy. That's a wonderfully thoughtful piece there. And as usual, I have comments and questions. And as usual, I offer the eagle feather to others. So, well, I'll maybe badger you with one or two. Skills, I made a comment, and I'll sort of turn it into a question. Skills literacy versus performance. What skill do you have versus why do I care? Can you just sort of talk about that? Is the idea of I have this skill, therefore it's good for you because. Can you just sort of talk about the relationship between skills and performance?
I think so, because so by performance, I'm assuming you mean what can I actually perform? What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think they're probably very, very similar in the sense that with skills literacy, I tossed up, do you call it capability literacy? But we talk about the skills-based economy, so I was sort of trying to line it up to that. But it's probably really more a broader term, which is saying, are people easily comfortable? Do they have the right language? Are they able to talk about what they can do? And so if you bring it back to what can I do, that becomes then, I think, the performance piece as well. Because I'll often ask people, tell me, tell me about your skills. And often they'll give you a list of things that they've produced, as in, oh, I did a report, I worked at board level, so I produced lots of board papers, or I completed this project on time. And all of these are around the output. It's a little bit the same when we talk about formal qualifications. I completed this degree. So we talk about what was produced, but we don't talk about the process. And I think for me, that's what this idea of skills and capability or performance is. How did you get there? I always think back to, I had a very, very good maths teacher when I was young, and they always said, show me the working. And I think this is a little bit of it. This makes that working explicit. Even if you don't always get the answer right, what method did you follow? Because that's your capability to produce the end result. And the idea is, can I do that again? And can I do it in a different context?
Mm-hmm. So what I'm picking up is the idea of inferring skills from work products, etc., and helping people not just sort of say, here's the work product. It's more like, here's the kind of thinking I had to do, something, critical analysis or whatever, or
Yeah, yeah. Look, a really good example is, nearly every university I've seen has what they call sort of, global learning or student outcomes, and it's things like, students who graduate from our university are critical thinkers, they're problem solvers, they're global citizens, they're team players. Yet when you talk to those people and you say, "Can you tell me about your team skills?" they don't, there's been nothing there in many cases that explicitly connects the fact that you contributed to 20 group projects over the course of your learning. You have built teamwork skills, but what the student and what often the educator is focused on, we were teaching you science or we were teaching you the subject. But and so it's almost as if we're expected to sort of pick up and understand these by osmosis. And whereas I'm advocating we need to be much more explicit, alongside saying you learned about the scientific principle, and by the way, here's your score or how you did on teamwork or critical thinking or problem solving, or even just telling people, if we go back into schools, telling kids when you do a history project, you're researching, you're using comparative analysis, and kids aren't told that, so they don't connect that I have these skills developing. I always think of it, it's a little bit like the unknown unknowns. If you don't have the language, if it's not pointed out to you, you quite simply don't see it. And that's why I think so many young kids, they come out and they say, well, I have no skills, how do I get a job? But really, schools, universities have been teaching kids skills for years.
right, just not explicitly.
Yes.
Right. So, is it better to announce it at the beginning or announce it at the end? Guess what you just did? You just did some critical analysis or whatever. What do you think?
I think it should be built into everything. So if you're, for example, developing a student task, there's nothing wrong with saying, to complete this task, you need to find at least 4 sources and compare them, which is comparative analysis. So it's just that constant naming. It doesn't have to be complex.
Drip,
Just drip feed at every stage of it, to the point where it just becomes part of the language. And by all means, I've done quite a bit of work mucking around with AI, putting in things like formal skills frameworks and formal skills definitions, and saying, can you rewrite this in something that kids in year 8 would understand? And so AI can be really helpful in getting the language, but it's that idea of, and especially for lifelong learning, if people learn things in different places, if the underlying skills or capability are made explicit, it's much easier to connect. I learnt this here and it connects to here.
Okay, great. So I think I'm going to cut it there because I am next. So I want to leave myself enough time. Thank you very much for this, Wendy. Very, very thought-provoking. And for everyone, the presentation is available in the details in the program. So thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you at the International Day of Recognition Mark II